ignore the camera. I'm with you. Okay.
So if I could have you say, I can see it now, but say and spell your name and your association.
Sure. It's Dave Earle with Construction Labor Relations. Spell the name too?
Sure.
Yeah, DAVEEARLE, Director of Human Resource Services and Government Relations.
And we just came out with a substance abuse panel, and maybe you can address. We'll starting with, I don't know if it was you or somebody else said that it's much more prevalent than you think it is in the industry.
Oh yeah, one of the things we talked about is what you see in some areas of media in terms of drug use decreasing or changing, and what we see on construction sites. Anecdotally, what we hear consistently is that drug use is quite prevalent on sites. Not necessarily borne out by every result and measure that we get, but certainly we hear a lot that it's an emerging problem.
And maybe you could speak to some of the hot spots. I know they mentioned marijuana being the diet of construction. That's a funny way to put it, but
Which is interesting. When we look at marijuana use, there's a lot of confusion around is it legal, is it not. It remains illegal in Canada to use marijuana, but it's very, very commonly used in Canada. And the issue from our standpoint is impairment at the workplace. Not if you're a marijuana user or a smoker, but are you impaired when you come to the workplace? One of the interesting outcomes that we have from the program that we have in place is the number one drug test that comes back positive is cocaine, more than everything else combined.
now why do you think that is? Is that just because these guys are working long hours?
Well, part of it we talk about, and I think you heard it in the session, is lots of guys working long hours in isolated communities away from their support structures, and there's an expectation of, well, what else are they going to do? In terms of the prevalence of cocaine versus marijuana, what we're seeing and hearing a lot of, particularly anecdotally amongst the workforce, is that there's a sense that marijuana stays in your system a lot longer, whereas cocaine goes away quicker, so I'll simply move and transition to cocaine. It's an unintended consequence, perhaps, of some of the testing that's being done, and it is an area of concern. It's a much harder drug to deal with and much more addictive in a lot of ways than marijuana is.
And you mentioned that sometimes, well, first off, management isn't qualified to test, basically, because you said that they actually do use cocaine in nasal surgery. Like that's
Yeah.
probably a rare occurrence, but it could come up.
Yeah. One of the things that employers are looking at addressing this issue have to understand is they should not ever be the testers. They shouldn't be collecting the samples or having anything to do with the administration of that, simply because there's too much of a risk for them to have chains of custody broken and have different things happen where, through all good intentions, bad things happen. They have to contract with a third-party provider to be able to provide that level of service. Once the sample does come back, a lot of employers will want to know what the test results were. Again, one of the things I advise employers is you don't want to know what the specifics of the sample were. Part of any good program has another third-party validation where they'll actually take a look at what was the sample showing, how come it's there. It's entirely possible that an individual who has a legitimate medical prescription will be involved in an incident in the workplace and test positive. And there's a whole bunch of issues that go into that in terms of was it a valid prescription for what the core issue ultimately remains. Was the individual impaired? Not what are they taking, how come, but are they impaired in the workplace? And that's what the program has to focus on.
And you mentioned that could have nothing to do with drugs.
Correct. The law is really specific in BC. It talks about impairment being caused by alcohol, drugs, or other causes. Most often, impairment is caused by things other than alcohol or drugs. Fatigue, inattentiveness, stress levels, personal issues, all of those things compound and contribute to impairment. And it's one of the things we stress with employers is to make sure that they're aware that that's what they should be looking for is impairment. Not just drugs and alcohol. Those are components of it, but impairment's the real issue.
Now, obviously, it's an issue, and you're going to say it's more an issue than think it is. How do you deal with that?
First thing to do is to train your supervisors to be able to have constructive conversations with their crews. It's very difficult. Most construction supervisors become supervisors because they're good at their particular job or trade. They get moved up and they don't have the skills to be able to have a conversation with another individual on site. That's the key, is being able to have those conversations, to be able to observe people, to be able to pull them aside and say, excuse me, I've noticed this, that, and the other thing. What's happening? And to be able to have those conversations with a plan of managing it at the back end. It's certainly doable, but it does require training.
I don't know if you mentioned it, but it was definitely mentioned that such a transitional set of jobs
And for people that do test positive, it does become a bit of the ability that they just simply move from job to job. It's becoming harder and harder. I mean, the comment was made that people just move to Alberta. Well, I consistently hear from Alberta people just go to BC. And now, of course, the side comment was, I suppose, to move to Saskatchewan. Because we work in such a transient industry, individuals will move from site to site and job to job. And if they're not confronted with their behavior, they'll continue to exhibit that behavior and continue to use until such time as something really bad happens, and then everybody's in the glue.
And I think that's pretty much it, unless you can think of something else I'm not asking.
No, I think that's about it. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Awesome. That's
Anytime, Warren. Thanks so much.